the session. We're just going to wait for a few more people to show up in the old attendees box there, and then we'll be kicking off. So in the meantime, why don't you go into the chat function, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is down the bottom, and tell me your name and the town or city you're currently in. That would be a good start, so we can say hello and we know who you are. So if you just type in the little chat box there, your name and town or city you're from, that would be awesome. In the meantime, welcome. A lot of the attendees, the numbers are going up. Laura, London. Hey, Nicholas, Brooklyn. Good evening. Lorna in London. Nora from London. We got Laura, Lorna, and Nora. What poetry is going on this evening? Love it. Natalie in Philly. Hey, Natalie. Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us. Just people joining us now. I can just see we have a few more joining us. We're going to kick off very soon. In the meantime, do jump on the chat box and say, jump on the chat and say who you are and where you are in the world. John in Baltimore. I know who that is. John, hello. Lovely to see you. Lena from London. Welcome.
Oh,
Natalie
John.
from London. Danny from London. It's Kelly. I wonder who she is. So welcome. How are we doing on numbers? We'll wait for a few more to join us. I know we have a full house. Karina from London. Hello and welcome. Nicole from Wimbledon. Got all the London postcodes. Mark from Hertfordshire. Hi, Mark. I think you are Twitter friends, so good to see you. Any more who would like to say hello? Do jump on the webinar chat. Let us know your name and the town or city you're in. So far, I think we just have UK and US, but do holler if you're from any other countries that we haven't mentioned yet. Any more people who'd like to say hi? Well, it's 33 minutes past. We'll give it one more minute. We have Mark, another Mark. Anyone else want to say hi? Please go to the chat. Let us know where you are in the world and your name. Javita from London, hello. Hashtag we are using, very good question. Sabah in London, hi. Yeah, what hashtag are we going to use, Kelly? Any ideas?
I don't know. We should come up with one. Maybe John's got an idea too. I know he's hiding there in the background. Gosh, good question. I mean, I'll put my usual hashtags in the chat, but yeah, it'd be great to have one for the event, so people we can archive some conversation. But people might be taking notes, so they might not be tweeting. But you know, who knows? We'll find out.
Well, look, I think we're going to kick off. So thank you very much for joining me, and good evening wherever you are in the world. I'm Ian Sanders, and I'm sitting here in Leigh-on-Sea, which, if you don't know your UK geography, if you think of a map of the UK and you see London, just to the right of that is Leigh-on-Sea, 40 miles to the right of London, or to the east of London. And Kelly and I, in an ideal scenario, we would have been together at General Assembly in Whitechapel High Street this evening. But obviously, things have changed. You know, our working lives have changed. Wow, so much, haven't they? They've changed radically and dramatically over the last few days, few weeks. And I mean, I was thinking this morning, you know, this week feels very different from last week. And I mean, even here in the UK, like today feels very different from yesterday. So it's quite hard to keep up. And what I want to do in this session with Kelly is to navigate us through some of that chaos with some business and career advice from my friend Kelly. And I just want to give a bit of context to my relationship with Kelly. Was that Kelly and I met in December 2012. Yes, that long ago, when I wrote an article about Kelly for the Financial Times. I think it's fair to say we hit it off and we stayed in touch, and, you know, quite relevant for today's session. You know, we've had a relationship that a lot of it's been remote. You know, it's been a transatlantic online relationship, but like the best relationships, it's been nurtured by all that lovely in-person stuff, walks around cities, face-to-face drinks, dinners, and all the rest of it. If you don't know Kelly's work, she's a real networking expert. She's a speaker, and she's the author of this fantastic book, Build Your Dream Network, Forging Powerful Relationships in a Hyper-Connected World. And what we're going to do over the next 60 minutes in terms of the kind of format, Kelly and I are going to have a bit of a conversation, but we want to make it really very much focused for you, everyone that's on this webinar. So we do invite your Q&A in the Q&A box later on, and we want to make sure that you get out of this session what you need. So that's enough intro from me. Kelly, so lovely to be spending time with you, albeit on Zoom.
You know, this is where technology comes in handy, and yeah, I'm loving that we're getting to do this. I'm loving that we're getting to connect with so many people online and help them in the moment. And I still want that rain check to, you know, for the in real life in London. I'm holding you and General Assembly to it.
You bet. We'll do that. We'll do that later in the year. So just to kind of catch up on where we're all at. I mean, how are you finding the whole working at home thing? You're based in Midtown Manhattan. How are you finding the working from home vibe?
I mean, this is sort of my usual vibe. So, you know, there's, in some ways, this is kind of business as usual for me, and someone who relies heavily on digital tools to stay in touch with people. I think what I've found, though, Ian, over the, you know, it's kind of nice not to have to worry about a siren or 16 coming down, you know, 6th Avenue during the recording of this, which I, you know, would have been worried about in the past. It's very quiet out there. But what I've really noticed is we're now using digital tools like this in much more human ways, not in one-way push marketing ways. So if there is a silver lining to this unprecedented situation we're in, that is it for me.
Well, that's a nice silver lining, and we all need those right now. So I think it's a really interesting time to be looking at this topic, how to use your network in these tough times. It's a big question. It's a big area, Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, I know your take on this, but I think for everyone who's joining us this evening, I think it's really important that we just unpack what we mean by networking. I know you're asked every time, so forgive me for that. But, you know, as I've seen you say on stage many times, you know, we've got this term networking that makes so many of us feel so grubby, right? So like, so perhaps the starting point, Kelly, might just be to unpack it in terms of, you know, the Kelly Hoey definition of what you mean about, you know, you got this great book, How to Build Your Dream Network, and when you're talking about networking.
Yeah, I mean, let's sort of divide it between the noun and the verb. You know, the noun is, and what the title of the book, you know, Build Your Dream Network. What are the community of relationships that you are continually building every single day so that you have a community around you that will support you in good times and in bad. You know, how we get things done is with the help of other people. So what are the communities, and what is the network you have? As for what are the actions you take to build one, I like to sort of, you know, as you noticed, or you said, the grubby feeling of networking. You know, too many people show up when they need something as opposed to showing up every day for your network. I think of networking, the verb, as every single human interaction. So back in the day when we went to an office, perhaps, you know, how did you greet you know, the receptionist or the security guard? How did you speak with your colleagues? Did you hold the door to the lift or the elevator for someone? Did you pass on a resource? Did you mentor? Like, all of those things in the terms of the human activity, that to me is networking. Not do you have the perfect elevator pitch and the handshake and, you know, schmooze at an event. How do we show up every day? How do you assign work to people? You know, how do you ask them about their lives? Do you show up on time? You know, you think then if it's every single human interaction, layer on the digital. Okay, so what's your email signature line? How are you interacting on Twitter? You know, what's the tone of the post? Are you being of service by, you know, helping other people by, I don't know, commenting on their Instagram? Like all of those touch points to me are networking. And so if you think about it that way, we have just thousands of opportunities on any given day to build relationships.
Well, I love that definition about every human interaction. And I think we are living in a time, aren't we, these right here, right now, when that need to be more human in those interactions is heightened. And, you know, I mean, I'm someone like you, Kelly, spends a lot of time on Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter. And it's been heartening to see some of those human engagements and people supporting each other. And, you know, us Brits can be a bit shy sometimes of, rather than our American friends or Canadian friends, in terms of going big on the warm and emotive language. But you know what I've noticed, and I've noticed myself doing it, just putting out some messaging, which is like, you know, take care out there, everyone, and meaning it, but like feeling that we can all be unified at the moment in these difficult times by those human interactions. So,
I think anything else right now is grating. It appears tone deaf. It appears callous, as opposed to caring. And I think, you know, it's one of, I truly believe this. I think the belief that the way we treat people right here, right now is going to have a far more lasting implication than the time period that we are in self-isolation or quarantined. Mm-hmm. And this is, I feel just really strongly on this. We are going to remember who was there for us, and we are going to write off people who are tone deaf.
Mm. I think you're right. I mean, we're seeing that, aren't we, with business leaders and corporations. We had a lot of people tweeting in the UK about people that are behaving well and people not behaving well. And you're right. That's gonna drill down for the individuals as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I mean,
okay, so
I mean, I've had some, probably like you, some incredible crap in my inbox or whatever, and it's like, whoa, hold on a minute here. Did you just, you know, crawl out from under a rock? Do you not know what is going on? But we should talk about some of those instances where people right now desperately need their networks and how they can start unpacking and feeling about that, and how they can effectively reach out to someone that they may not have talked to in a while, but need to talk to now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is easy to get wrong. And I talk from personal experience when I was, you know, a younger man. And I just tell this short story that when I first went to South by Southwest in 2010, 2009, I met an amazing bunch of people. And when I came back to the UK, I thought, I've got all these people that I met and I wanted to reach out to them. And I constructed an email that I did a bit of copy and pasting with. It wasn't automated. And it said, great to meet you. I loved your session. A bit more about me. Here's a link to my book. And I remember a guy who I'd been introduced to. He was based in DC. And I'd been really, really impressed by meeting him and what he did at South by. And he sent me an email and said, thanks for the spam. He sent me an email back saying, thank you for the spam. And I just realized, like, shit, I got it totally wrong, but I didn't have a clue. I thought I was being warm and genuine. I was doing this, and he just thought I've spammed him with, you know, some links to my own propaganda. So, you know, just for a starting point, when we're also keen to reach out to other people and to build bridges, what are some of your best practices, Kelly, about, I mean, some of it's obvious, isn't it, at the moment, you know, reaching out, which tone deaf, but do you have any general advice for people that might be a bit starting out in their career and they want to build their LinkedIn network, or they want to reach out at the moment for a whole load of reasons, and how to not get it wrong?
Take a big breath before jumping into action. One of the quotes I often give to people when they're sort of thinking about how they're going to start reaching out or what is going to be that communication is a quote of Einstein's, where he was asked if he had an hour to solve a problem, how would he do it? And he said he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about it. I think we really need to think, in good times and bad, we need to think about our communication. And then that process of thinking about our communication, thinking about, all right, who are the people I'm seeking to have, I want to help me. What is going on in their lives? What's going on with the companies they work for? What's going on? Are they homeschooling? Are they what's their situation? This is also the benefit of when we have social media, because this is kind of the good stalking on the internet. You can kind of stalk around and see what's going on. And this is where I sort of say, if you're going to reach out, do the research first. Spend the time figuring out what is going on directly with that person, not a group of people that you want to send a group email to, but that individual. And if it means that you only get to send out 5 emails in a day instead of 500, God bless, they're going to be 5 really good emails that might get you closer to what you need as opposed to 500 deletes. And so reach out on an individual, personalized, customized basis, but do it after skulking around and seeing what's going on. I mean, one of the best skills we all can have right now is critical thinking, and to apply those skills to your networking. So for example, if you saw that someone used to post at a regular time, say on Facebook, and all of a sudden they're not posting, okay, what's the deal? Are they sick? Are they homeschooling? And therefore they're trying to get 3 kids or 2 kids or a kid through a bunch of classes, so they're not online. Are they all, what's the reason? Sort of pay attention to that to sort of figure out. And maybe, it's holding off on emailing them, or maybe it's really sending an urgent text saying, I haven't heard from you, and I used to really rely on your, regular Monday morning or Tuesday morning or every morning at 8 a.m. updates, and I haven't seen them. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? I think the more we can think right now of being very well prepared before we ask for something, and how we can be of service to others. And that may be directly saying to them, I care about you. How are you doing? Is there anything I can do to help? Or being of service can be really paying attention to what is going on in their lives so that you are understanding their pain, understanding the pain point you can solve for them, and asking in the right way if it is that you're, say, pitching them for a job or work or business or whatever.
So I like that. Thanks, Kelly. I like that for people you might know who are in your existing network, because you can nuance it. You have an understanding. You might follow them on Instagram. You know about their private life, their family life, and all the rest of it. What about someone where you want to reach out to them and they're a business leader, or you read an article in the New York Times or the Financial Times about them? You'd love to help them, or maybe you do want an opportunity with them. That's harder, right? Because that person, by their very nature, they're going to have a lot of things in their inbox. How can you balance kind of getting noticed at the same time as, being genuine, but also, let's be honest, getting a response from someone where you're approaching them cold in the current climate?
I think part of it is what are they putting out there and saying what they really need? It's one thing so let's just take the governor of New York State right now. He put out hey, this is what I need. And businesses stepped up and responded saying, you know what, Governor, I can switch my clothing manufacturer's stuff from making designer gowns that no one's going to wear to making, fabric masks for medical professionals. So someone may put out something like that. Others may put out something in your way of saying, gosh, you know what, this in long term is a company I'm interested in. When they are hiring again or doing stuff, paying attention to them, resharing information they're putting on. Again, apply your critical thinking skills and kind of chase that thread or that kind of rabbit hole letting people know. Maybe a leader says something and you just respond with saying, thank you for providing this kind of leadership at this time. This is what we need.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe to take a step back. And we're talking a lot about Twitter because, again, I sort of feel like Twitter has gone back to kind of 2008, 2009 when I first got on it, when we were all like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
Can we hang out? We can talk to each other, right? And we used it in a very human way. And it very much feels to me like we're back at that time period. People are being more open. They're being more vulnerable. They're willing to have conversations. I used to refer to Twitter as like the cocktail party. Like, are you the good guest? And maybe right now on some of these platforms, you want to be the good guest, so you get invited into conversation. So that doesn't mean immediately pitching, your business, but saying, wow, that's really interesting. I like what you're having to say on that. Maybe it's going back to your own little cocktail party and saying, wow, I've just heard some really interesting things. And this is in line with some of the stuff that I've been talking about. And it was really great to hear it somewhere else. And maybe you talk to your own community about that. And then you can, kind of take the time. The point is, and and this is the frustrating thing for people, is for so many people right now, they want fast answers. How do I build a relationship with Ian? How do I build a relationship with this leader? Human relationships, and why networking is hard, is we are squirrely, weird creatures. We have messy, complicated lives. We always have. We have these digital tools that make it seem that we can instantly be friends with someone, right? I can instantly sell you something. And you really have to think with every communication, how would it feel if I said this to this person's face?
Yeah.
And the more you can think about it that way. But if you have, a skill or, the ability to convert a factory or, stop making, gin in your, bespoke distillery and turn it over to hand sanitizer. I think, when you see a request and a call and saying, hey, I know how to help you with that. Who should I get in touch with? Mm. And maybe that's the way to do it, rather than saying, oh, I can do that. Here's my resume. Saying, I can help with that. You seem to have this problem. I can help with that. Who should I get in touch with?
Thanks, Kelly. That's a nice steer. And I like that whole thing about, how would it feel if you were actually asking them face-to-face or in person? By the way, people that have joined in the last few minutes, do feel free to put a question into the Q&A. We're going to go to Q&A in a minute because we've got a question there from John. Just type your question in Q&A and we'll answer it on the call as we go. Kelly, I suppose, as you were saying that about doing your homework, I know that's a real bugbear of yours. When people reach out to you or reach out to anyone and they haven't done their homework, they haven't checked.
Like, if I could do a Linda Blair head spin from The Exorcist right now on this one, like, I wish there was a way, maybe I'm going to request Zoom that they give you those abilities to kind of like put in how you're feeling. I had someone, and this is why I interrupt, I had someone who wanted to speak to me about speaking, like getting me to help them with a conference.
Right.
And I'd been referred into them. And the young woman who contacted me said, I know I can read about you online, but why don't you tell me about yourself?
Right.
I nearly said, we can end this. I was, only because of the person who referred me in, did I hold myself together. I was ready. If it hadn't been referred in that way, I would have said, this is done. You're wasting my time. If you are so disorganized.
Yeah.
And so, cavalier, I shouldn't, I'm not going to do the research. She can tell me about it. Which also brings up a really good point. All of us have a certain amount of social capital, and you need to keep making deposits into that bank of social capital so that people want to help you on the other end.
Mm. That's a good point. I was just reflecting on something that happened today, and let's face it, there's an opportunity because, I have a bit more time on my hands than I normally do because a lot of my work has been postponed. So I'm in a different kind of mode as I'm holed up at home. And I had a call today with someone who had reached out to me because he'd seen he'd seen me online and he'd seen my Do Lecture, which, if you're not familiar, people on the call, the Do Lectures, wonderful event, happens in Wales every year, over here in the UK, that I'd spoken at. And this guy reached out to me with an email, and the email said thanks, and it was like, wow, I loved your Do Lecture, this is my story, da, 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 da. Because it was such a nuance, to your point, Kelly, because he was thinking about what he wanted to say to me, and actually he was wanting to say thank you, which is like really nice. And rather than just me kind of file it away, because I had a bit of time, I was like, great, happy to. He was like, perhaps we can meet for coffee sometime. And I was like, I tell you what, we're not going to meet for coffee, not in the current climate, but why don't we jump on a call? And I wouldn't normally, I have the time to do that today. I might not normally have the time to do that, but I just think, because of the way he reached out to me, which is human to human, even though it was an email in my inbox from someone I'd never heard of, because it said thank you in a subject title, it was a really good way of us having a really good engagement. I enjoyed the conversation. He was very grateful. We're going to stay in touch, So yeah.
Well, it's sort of one of those things. Like, if you can find the answer that you want from someone from a Google search, and realize that, take you for an example, you've written books, you've done this Do Lecture, there's you've got a blog, like, read that stuff, because then when you do reach out, someone does reach out to someone like you can ask a better question. And that is more likely that someone is going to want to respond, mentor, build a relationship than, oh, I know I can read about you online.
Yeah.
Tell me about yourself. Or, hey, I've had this one. Hey, Kelly, your career seems really interesting. Could we talk about it? I'm like,
why?
What part of it is interesting? If the more hyper specific someone is, hey, Kelly, how the heck did you become, I read your book and I saw this and I looked at your LinkedIn profile. How the heck did you become the first president of a global networking group for women? I still don't understand how you made that career change. That's great. And I think, and maybe it's for me, and Yara mentioned, I live here in New York. I am Canadian. New Yorkers get right to the, I think of it like darts. You don't aim for the outer rings, you aim for the bullseye. And you aim for the bullseye by doing your research and your homework and getting all the information. And then when there's that, why I still don't understand something here. And the more you can aim for the bullseye, the more likely someone is going to step up and help you.
I love that. So clear and targeted approaches when you be very clear what you want. I like that. So as Magdalena's just said on the chat, great point with the bullseye, and good point from Natalie there. The best way to be mentored is to help someone. Those tend to be the folks I end up organically mentoring. So
and I love that. I love that, Natalie. And to sort of the think about it, like, if you want to be mentored by someone, the way to help someone to help you as a mentor is, do that homework, do that background, ask them a specific question, tell them, the things you've done that maybe there's a skill you're trying to attain, and here's the things I've done. Do you have any other suggestions for me? That helps someone mentor you by being proactive, being prepared. On the flip side, I also say this to people because people are, now that we're, maybe more than ever, with people seeking mentors in this very interesting time, think about it in a different way, in the sense that you can be mentored by someone because they have written books, they do a podcast, they have an online course, they tweet or interact on. You could be mentored by someone around a specific topic or subject you're interested in if you're paying attention to the information, the content, what they are sharing in the world, and look at mentoring that way as well. I think the idea of the one-on-one mentor for life has been truly dead for a long time, and sort of taking this different kind of twist and approach on it, might be something that could help people out at this time.
Absolutely. Let's go to John's question. And that's a lovely example because John and I, who have a lovely relationship online, John and I met. John read one of my Medium posts. He reached out to me, and we started, we Skyped a few times, and in fact, he engaged in one of my coaching sessions. So we've had a lovely dialogue over the years. And John says, as I type this message, and hear my kids bickering and yelling at each other downstairs. Got to love the homeschooling. Do you find you're leveraging your networks in new, more shared pain ways, almost more therapeutic in nature? That's interesting, isn't it? Because as we're being more open with each other about the times we're in, I find I mean, I naturally do this anyway, but kind of being vulnerable and kind of going, this is shitty. Yeah. What's your take on this, Kelly?
Oh, absolutely. Like sharing coping mechanisms, or, being here in Manhattan, it was also one of these things with some of my friends. They couldn't find some of the supplies, Tylenol, things like, and you sort of all of a sudden your coping mechanism is, you know what? I got 3 pharmacies within a 3-block radius.
Wow.
What do you need? I'll go find it. And so I think we are being much more vulnerable. We're much more kind of showing that we're bruised and raw, because everybody is. And maybe not showing that is where we're having friction with other people. But I think that idea of we are sharing coping mechanisms and we are sharing solutions, because we all know, or most of us know, we're kind of in this together. And getting out of this is going to be a community effort, not a solo person's effort.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, John, my take on John's question is that I've been having much more open and honest conversations with my peer group about the state of my business commercially and the effect all this lockdown is having on things. And I've taken a lot of comfort from that, because that's the kind of person I am. And it's hard sometimes where you got to put that mask on and go, how are things? They're great. And they're not so great. So in a way, we've got this level playing field where like a lot of people are going through a similar thing. And I love that shared sense of community. Mm-hmm. Great question, John. Any other questions? Do jump on the Q&A and type your answer, and we'll deal with it as we go. So Kelly, I want to ask something, right, which is, I'm guessing for quite a few people at the moment, whether they are working in an organization or whether they're self-employed, they've probably got someone on their list which they want to follow up with. They want to chase, because they're waiting to hear a decision on something. And let's assume it's a decision on something that is still practical to deliver. So it's not, they can deliver something remotely, or they're waiting on an order on something or whatever. But they want to hold off for good human reasons, that they don't want to be tone deaf, to your earlier point. But it's really important for their business. It's business critical that they can reach out to this person and go, look, I know it's a difficult climate, but I'd love a decision on this. Any advice for that situation? I mean, you made some good points before about putting yourself in the shoes of the person who you want to reach out, have that communication with, but anything else where you want something, and yeah, sure, you could go in with a how can I help you, but it might be like it's going to be really clear, oh, that was the person that wants that project greenlit or whatever. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, let's kind of look at it too. I actually have a friend who's going through this right now and is waiting to, literally waiting for the employment contract. So one of the things that we discussed and she chose to do was she just set a Google alert on the company. Because part of this is too, there is an element of the job's the job and you want just, you need the paycheck, okay? But if you have a choice, maybe your choice right now is I want to work for a company that's responding well at this time. And so we said, set a Google alert for the company and the people you've been talking to, because they may be, she was speaking to very high up in this global company, that they may be people who are doing press releases and, doing the public kind of face of the company. I said, and see what's going on, and, do your gut check on that you still want an employment offer, but also this gives you fodder to reach out. And so she was able to reach out to say, hey, I love the way you are handling this. And this really makes me, really reaffirms, the conversations we've had. And, hey, I know the pain you're going through, where to find me. I look forward to, kind of signing on the dotted line and starting, but that's one thing, like do those kinds of things, because again, I'm not going to judge anyone for saying, I just need to take a job. I don't care if they're being jerks right now. I need to get the paycheck. I'd be like, hey, I get it. We got to keep a roof over our head and food on the table and all that kind of good stuff. But if you have a choice, you may want to kind of check. And then this gives you an ability to kind of check in with people that way. I mean, she did this and included in it a genuine, and God, I know you've got, this also going on in your personal life. Hope you're probably working 24/7, and I respect that, and I'm not expecting an answer, blah, blah. They got back to her so fast and said, hey, thank you for having patience with us. Let us get through this next week, and then we can get back on track, because we need your skills more than ever now, given what we're kind of going through. So that's kind of there on the employment side. If you were selling in product or something, take a pause and think for a minute, like, where now does your product or service fit within the priorities of the company you were selling into? Is it higher up or is it lower down? Also think about what, in terms of selling something in, think it like, again, this is really, in terms of networking, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. What on their kind of priorities, like what were the resources, what were the other things they were thinking that they needed to implement your product or service, right? What's happened with all of that? Because we all know supply chains have completely gone amok. Maybe you were selling in a product that relied on a bunch of inputs from, let's take a guess, China, South Korea, or Italy. Guess what? You've now got a 2 or 3 month delay because, gosh, we can't get anything out of those countries. So sit down and really unpack and kind of create a timeline, because that also may help you in terms of thinking about, oh, here's what's going on with this person's company. This is the resources. This is the stuff we talked about. Okay, here's what's realistically going to be some delays. On the basis of that, here's what I think is the recovery timeline for this project. And maybe a communication is to this person is like, hey, I hope you're doing okay. I can see this, from what I can see, our project is now kind of going to be sidelined until around this period of time. I'm going to check in with you. I'm going to make sure, you're doing okay. I'm here to speed things up or slow things down, depending on what's going on with you. People need to know they've got a partner, and they want to partner with people who understand their pain. So, and when I said to create this recovery timeline, and I talk about it in my podcast, in the episode that actually came out today, it was, not only a recovery timeline that you think for the company you're selling into or want to be hired by. Think about and part of that recovery timeline is like people getting back into the office. I mean, just as we're adjusting, so many people are adjusting to being out of the office, we got to adjust to being back in.
Yeah.
Our schools on the same timeline. Is someone's spouse's company on the same, there's all sorts of pieces. Think about your own life. Like, you could have the person you're selling into saying, oh, I'm back in the office on the 15th. You ready to go? And you're like, no, because my spouse is sick and my kid's school is out until the 30th. No, I can't show up on the 15th. So think about your own timeline and their timeline. I think the more honest we can be about kind of figuring those things out and talking about them, but, showing the other person you understand that there is this, you understand their pain, you understand that they're making adjustments, and that while you're anxious or excited to still remain anxious or excited to work with them, you're not expecting it to happen on the same, plan line that you planned before.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I heard myself say something to someone yesterday, which was just like, just be super patient right now. Don't rush it, and you just, I know right. We want answers tomorrow, but we're not in that climate at the moment, and we might just have to sit on our hands for a while and see what happens with getting decisions out of people and all the rest of it. More of a general point, but I mean, I guess I would have asked this regardless of the current climate, because it interests me, which is, what do you say to people when they're not sure how far to take it in terms of, let's say, being vulnerable or displaying any kind of anxieties or kind of exposing ourselves in a professional setting? Now, if you get asked to talk at a conference that has a certain theme and they want people to bear their soul, that's one thing. But just generally in terms of business communications and, you know, with your network. What's your take on that, Kelly? Because I know one thing social media has done is kind of an alignment, hasn't it, between the public persona and the private persona. For a lot of people, they're the ones thing they are for me and they are for you. But what do you feel about that in terms of how far people go so they don't get too so it feels safe, right?
Yeah. I mean, everyone is different. There's a lot of my personal that I don't think is anyone's business. It belongs between the one or two people I'm talking to at that moment. I know when I've been in London in the past and had coaching sessions with you, you know, well after the fact, we've talked about it. In the moment, it's no one's business that you and I are, having a coaching session walk and talking about, you know, what's next for the business of Kelly. I'm seeking your advice. You know, that's where it is. Because I think there's sometimes people will think, oh, they're over by the Tate Modern. I'll just race over and find it. No, it's, you know, my ex was not on social, so I would never use his name and did not post pictures because it was his choice not to do that. Yeah. And I needed to honor and respect that. I think it's more important to kind of really realize that people do have these full lives. Everyone doesn't need to know every single problem in your life, but to be honest, if someone says, hey, can we jump on hey, let's continue that conversation on that service contract because we can bring it up. Can I do a Skype call with you at 9 a.m. and to be able to say, actually, you know what? 9 a.m. the Wi-Fi in our house is at full demand because this, you know, my roommate, my kids, my whatever, they have this. Here are some alternative times. Could I suggest, you know, 8 a.m.? Could we do it at 8:30? Could we do, you know, like provide some alternatives so that people understand that you do have some limitations, but they don't need to know every, you know, gory detail. And I think, and I would say that, I mean, I think people want to know now, but not everything, because they've, you know, you don't want to come across like sort of a tidal wave of more problems that someone else can't take on because they got their own, but they want to know that you're sensitive to the fact that, yeah, you understand.
Can we just be specific for a moment and talk about Instagram, which is kind of relevant in that context? I think it's interesting how we've got a very obvious networking platform in LinkedIn. That's obvious. Most of us on this call are all very familiar with how we use that. In fact, that's funny. I just seen the question come up from Lena, which is very similar. Lena, we're on the same wavelength. I'll come to Lena's point in a minute. But yeah, thinking about, you know, LinkedIn is very obvious for networking, and Twitter perhaps less so. But what I'm feeling is interesting is Instagram, because I put my real self out on Instagram. Although to your point you've just been making, I'm not going to, if I'm having a really bad day, I'm not going to probably be that honest. But I'm just curious about, I have a lot of business contacts that follow me on Instagram. What do you think about Instagram? Is it kind of an underrated tool in terms of building business relationships with people? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, depending on your industry, you know, kind of different people do things. I'm sort of looking at this question here, and I think, you know, yeah, I mean, Instagram, you know, visual, you know, I think people who have been in very visual businesses or maybe how to, you know, there can be an overload now of people posting, trying to get the inspirational quote so it goes viral. Please, like, stop, like, just be authentic, be genuine, you know, be yourself. But I love this question, and let's go to this question in terms of the best platform for business related questions with someone we don't know. Some of this stuff, what I would suggest is go and see what platform the person's most active on and how they're active on it. They may just be posting once a day on Instagram, or maybe once a day, or, you know, on LinkedIn. See if they comment on any of their posts, if other people comment, like, where are they having a conversation? You may find they're not having a conversation on any of those things. So you go over to their website and they've got a form you fill out to ask a question. They've indicated their communication preferences. So, You know, networking is about communication. What's their communication preference? I would hesitate on DMing someone that you don't know. That's, I would rather see you, if it was someone you don't know and you see that that person is having online conversations, do it publicly, saying, you know, I find this conversation is really interesting. There is something I'd like to ask you about. What's another way I can get in touch with you? Yeah. And someone may say, hey, DM me. You know, I'll look for you, whatever. Let them decide, because sometimes, you know, it's almost like a game now. I play with a friend in Toronto and a friend in Dublin, Ireland. It's our LinkedIn fail. And it's like, who has the worst LinkedIn in-mail of the day? And it's like, or connection request of the day. So in some ways, if there is someone you want to talk to, asking them, saying, wow, I really, you know, this really interests me and I've got a question. How, you know, and I'd rather ask you in a private way, or I'd like to, you know, somewhere else I can ask you for a more detailed answer. Where's the best place for me to do that? Let them tell you, rather than, you know, possibly irritating them and then you don't get your answer.
I agree.
I hope that helps. I hope that helps. You can give us a thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, great question, Lena. Yeah, I think I'd agree with Kelly, really. I think it really depends on the person. Like for me personally, if it was someone I didn't know, I wouldn't want it on Twitter DM. Instagram, you know, you have to do the permission to someone wants to send you a message, and there's so much spam in that I tend to, that doesn't feel the right place. For me, I'd like a LinkedIn message, or even just an email to my generic hello at address, you know, with a nice title that I'm going to look at. That might catch my eye. I hope you don't mind, ... thank you, or may I ask you something, you know, being really specific. So yeah, LinkedIn. Oh yeah,
I mean, let me say the S word. The more specific you are, the more likely you're going to get your answer.
Yeah.
You know, make it easy for someone. And they may say, oh yeah, here, I wrote about it here, or here's this blog post. Or they may say, you know what, let's jump on the phone because it'll take me 5 minutes and writing an email is going to take me 20. Like, the more specific, and again, it goes back to kind of that thing like a dartboard. We're often think when networking, the more generic we are. Yeah. I'm going to use this example. I'm looking for a job. Your network doesn't know how to help you when you ask generic. Your network knows how to help you when you ask specific. And if you're reaching out to a particular individual, the more specific you are, they can find you an answer, as opposed to tell me about your career, as opposed to, you know, whatever. Yeah. How'd you write a book? Like whatever. Like, I don't figure it out. But go specific if you're reaching out to people.
I agree. So, oh, that's good. Lena said it does answer, so thanks. So good. You nailed it there. You hit the bullseye again. Any more questions, do throw them into the Q&A. How are we doing for time? Yeah, we're all good for time. Throw them into the Q&A and we'll go to those in a minute. In the meantime, I just want to follow up on that. Kelly, you talking about those LinkedIn fails. You know, I have an interesting relationship with LinkedIn. I've been spending a lot more time on it in the last 6 months. I didn't feel it was the natural platform for me, so I didn't spend much time there. But as it's changed, and the nature of engagement feels a bit more like Twitter 10 years ago, without being too nostalgic, I've been enjoying spending time on LinkedIn. But yeah, we get those really crappy, no one's thought about it, approaches that people don't even bespoke the, you know, when you can customize the words, the invitation. Yeah. So, come on, tell me, what are your rules on whether you do or don't accept LinkedIn requests? Because I think sometimes I'm inconsistent. I sometimes have some rules and then I feel ingenuous. So it sounds like, you know, don't know I get that many, but I do. You know, I'll go, oh yeah, what the heck? Yeah. And then I'm like, no. So come on, what are Kelly's go-to rules for LinkedIn requests?
Well, first of all, everyone needs to understand, even though we have the same technology, you know, there's not like you get a different set of LinkedIn tools for creating a profile, interacting, and we all have the same tools. How we use it varies because we are individuals. So you may accept every single LinkedIn request because you do, and I may say I don't request any. So you need to understand that. But with that in mind, my first rule is always personalize the message. Yeah. And it does not have to be a big thing. Yeah. It could be, really great meeting you, or it, like whatever it is, right? And really enjoyed the General Assembly webinar. Look forward to you coming to London to do this. Really liked your point on that. Like, personalize it, because then someone can place you. Like, how do we meet? How do we know each other? Because that's immediately going through someone's mind. If someone doesn't personalize it, and I haven't just said to them, just send me a request, I'll acknowledge it. But if I don't know who the person is, my initial reaction is to delete.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I delete is you've now made work for me to figure out who you are and why we should be connected. And I don't have time for that. This is a good point to a little Kellyism. We have 3 assets in life. We have our, a reputation, we have our relationships, and we have time. That's it.
Yeah.
Relationships and reputation, you can build those up and you can lose them. And you can build them up again and you can lose them. Time is our only non-renewable personal asset. Do not waste your time, and more importantly, don't waste anybody else's time. Because if you waste their time, they're not going to use their reputational or their social capital, to help you out. So if someone takes my time in an inefficient way, like, hey, you figure out who I am and why we should be connected, I've just automatically sent this message, dead, bye-bye. Like,
that feels like spam.
Yeah. But also too, so that's that kind of piece on it. And then, once I said, you can control this one thing. You can control how you reach out to someone. You can't control whether or not they're going to accept your invitation.
Yeah.
So don't take it personally if you've written a message that was really personal. Like, look at how they use LinkedIn. They may not be like you and me going on it regularly. They may show up once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
They may say, you know what, I only connect with people who I've, broken bread with. Therefore, their network would be closed at this point for a good long time. They may be at a point in their career where they have really kind of corralled things in versus throwing it wide open. So control what you can control, which is the form of the message. Write a personal one, if you're looking to connect with them that way. So
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just lazy, isn't it, if you're not, because you've got the opportunity. I mean, without going too technical, I do know, if you're doing it on the LinkedIn app, on iOS, you don't get an opportunity. It doesn't come up with a box to say, do you want to change it? But if you're on desktop, LinkedIn will ask you, do you want to add your own personal message? And yeah, you always should. And
it's almost like, for most people, it's like, you just make it easy. It's seamless for someone, to say yes and connect when you write that personal message.
Yeah.
And seamless is probably a good word to use right now. Who you are online and how you behave should be seamless to who you are in person. There shouldn't be a disconnect that way. And it probably the reason why you and I have such, a great relationship. It's probably a reason why, as I jokingly say in my book, I probably should have had a t-shirt on that said, I'm a woman you meet online. I'm old enough to know that when you said that about someone, that was not a good thing. But I meet so many people who are now dear close friends because of how I interact online. Thinking for a moment, sort of people here who might be thinking, how am I going to engage online, particularly for business? I know we're talking about LinkedIn. So I think of LinkedIn like the office, or going to the co-working space, or whatever. What's the business information? What are you posting? How can you be of service there so that you are providing information for others that is useful for them? I think Twitter, in many ways, I think of it like the cocktail party, but a lot of people use it in a kind of one-way push kind of marketing way rather than in an engaged way. So let me just also highlight, case study that is in my book. By the way, my book looks like this, Ian. Case study that's in my book, but also was a podcast interview. So it's my friend Elena Rossini, who is an independent filmmaker who lives in Paris. And I highlight her and say, go and follow her. She's @ _ Elena, ELENA. Elena gets 80% of her or more of her business leads, and probably close to 100% of her media interactions because of Twitter and how she uses Twitter. And she is very much about how she can be of service to others. She uses it in such a personal way. She got married last September, and she went off Twitter because she was planning her wedding. She went off Twitter for a month. She came back and she didn't lose any followers. I mean, most people would be like, oh my God, I can't leave, I'm gonna lose followers. She was like, I got things to do. She left for a month. She still had all her followers because she uses it in such a human way. So think more and more like, okay, if I'm showing up on LinkedIn and I'm either gonna post or comment, all right, let me pretend I'm walking into WeWork or the office or wherever, you know, like or the business conference. Like for me, I used to be a lawyer. I put the suit on when I think about going back on LinkedIn, and that's the way I interact. And that's the type of information I post. Go over on Twitter, you know, that's just like a candy store of different cocktail parties to attend. So, you know, but I always want to be the good guest and invited back. So how do I have conversations there so that people want to talk to me?
Yeah. And different behaviors and different mindsets for different platforms. So from Lena asking about networking events. I mean, the whole notion, they've got a lot of baggage, haven't they? Networking events. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, like rocking up to a meetup group or whatever. I mean, that's a networking event. I don't know why they necessarily should have that reaction from me. But are networking events useless or still a valid way of building up your network?
Okay, so I thank you, Lena, for asking all these awesome questions. This is like fantastic. You're reading our minds on things to talk about. So this is a good point. Time to kind of go back. You asked me earlier how I think about networking. We did talk about that in terms of building a network, and networking is the busy work. I never start when I start to strategically plan and think about what are the networking activities. That's the last thing I think about. So here's how I approach solving a problem. We solve problems with people. This is how I go about thinking about what networking activity I'm going to undertake. What is the problem, the challenge, like what is going on right now? Like that I need help of other people. Who are those people? Do I need to call Ian and have another coaching session? Do I need to email 10 people and ask them, how do I get a publisher for my book? Like, what's the problem and who are the right people for me to ask? Now, where are they hanging out? Are they on Twitter? Are they at a meetup? Is there a professional organization I have to go to? That's where the conference or event. So for me, when someone says, hey, Kelly, and we'll put it in the good old days when, you know, the old normal where we went to in-person events, when someone would say to me, Kelly, you should, and then they would name a conference or a meetup or an organization, I would look at them and say, tell me more. Why is this useful? What do you get out of it? And I need to then filter their answer against what it is that I'm trying to achieve. It could be a fabulous, you know, meetup to join with, but if it meets at a time that's inconvenient for you, well, then there's no point, is there? Or the conference is only good if, you know, you've been in the organization for 20 years and are in the like whatever. Ask, you know, kind of like a child, you know, small child, you know, the why. Ask the why before you think, oh my God, you know, conferences are useless or meetups are useless or Twitter is useless or whatever it is. Figure out who and what you need, who you're trying to interact with, and how and where they're hanging out. So let me give you an example, and it's actually one of my favorite case studies in the book. A guy by the name of Joe Styler. Joe is in the aftermarkets group at GoDaddy. Joe started off at an entry-level job, and over the period of his sort of 10, 12 years, he's now been at GoDaddy. He's moved from an entry-level customer service role into aftermarkets. If you're not familiar with aftermarkets, that's where people buy domains in the aftermarket. So when you hear of a .com selling for millions of dollars, that's what Joe does now. So what Joe did to move up is he initially focused on, all right, what's the skill set? What's the knowledge I need to have? Where are people I can learn from in this company, right? To gain those skills, and where are there opportunities that are of interest to me? And when he hit on aftermarkets, he realized not only did he need to build relationships with the people in the department currently, because if there was a chance opening, he wanted them to think of him first. So he knew he had to build a relationship with them. He also sort of studied and understood what was going on to understand that he couldn't just show up and say, I'm really interested in being in aftermarkets. He knew he needed to know the job, and he needed to know what was going on in the industry, which meant he had to go to the big conference that they do for people in aftermarkets and selling domains. At this point, I'll pause and say one more factor about Joe. He's an introvert.
Right.
Not in a little way. He's like a major introvert. The conference for aftermarkets is in Las Vegas. That is like a fast, like for me, that would be like a ticket to hell. If I was like, I'm borderline introvert. So that would be like a full on ticket to hell for me. I can only imagine for Joe, but he understood, and this is a long answer to your question. He understood the necessity of going to the conference, because he needed to build the relationships. He needed to have the profile. He needed to understand what they were talking about. And he knew he needed to do this before he even was hired for the job at aftermarket. So are conferences useless? They can be. Can they be highly beneficial for a variety of reasons? Absolutely. But understand why you're stepping into the room before you step into the room.
Oh man, otherwise, yeah, you're not going to get out of it what you want. I mean, look, my take on these kind of things is, I have made some amazing connections at conferences and events. The first time I went to the Do Lectures in 2012, met an amazing bunch of people who are still strong connections now. South by Southwest, perhaps not in the convention center, but the old cliche, people in the bars, the rooftop bars of Austin, met some great people. I guess, maybe why I prickled a bit when I saw networking events is, they do seem a bit last century sometimes. We do have in my local business community here in Essex, a networking event. I don't go to them, but I know people that do go to them, and people go along and you stand in a circle and you give your business card out. And I'm like, really? It's 2020. Perhaps we don't do that.
Yeah. When I finally come to London, don't take me to one of those. Like seriously, I like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
so I run a mile.
Oh, I always say from the same thing that someone posted on LinkedIn. He's like, "Who wants to make more connections? Like this post. Send a connection request to everyone else who likes this post." And I'm like, "Oh my God, who thought this was a good idea? Yeah, this is horrific." But again, every time you think you're wondering why you're doing something, or you're thinking, like, before someone like forces in your face or down your throat to say, hey, you should, step back and say, what is it I'm trying to achieve? Who are the people I want to reach? Is this activity in any way aligned with that? Because then you can make smarter choices. You can use your time wisely. And you may, like, go back to Joe's example, you may think, oh my God, a large group is the last thing I want to do, but it may be the best and the most important thing that you do.
Yeah. Well, that brings us on nicely to Natalie. Natalie Nixon, what do you think of advice I've received about networking to think of those around you as guests in your home, to shift the way you interact with them? Priya Parker's work, The Art of Gathering, she says to think of clients as guests and that we should honor and awe guests. I mean, that's quite a shift. I'm not sure necessarily about thinking of the guests in your home, but certainly it makes it a bit more human, a bit more personal, doesn't it?
Right. Well, one of the tips of advice I have in my book is, like, when you go to an event, even if you have like clear understanding why you want to be there, is to think like the host, because we're all nervous and anxious. We often assume that just because other people have been there before, that they are less anxious, that they, have got their act together, that they're, whizzes and comfortable at this. Most people aren't. Some people just have a better facade of handling the situation. So think like the host. How can you be helpful to other people? How can you be interested in other people? How can you, if you start a conversation with someone in those environments, how can you welcome other people into the conversation? And I'm saying this knowing that we are all in self-isolation, but this is part right now. You are being a great facilitator and host because you're keeping your eye on the Q&A as well as the chat and bringing in these other, the attendees. So it's not just you and I having a conversation. I would say the same thing on Twitter. It's the same thing. Maybe think about your own Instagram that way. When someone leaves a comment, maybe besides, giving it a little heart or whatever else, maybe you comment back on it. Maybe it's a familiar name and you say, "Oh my God, lovely to see you. How are you?" Like, the more we can do that and think of like the host, making other people comfortable, pulling them into the conversation, taking notice and care and how they are, the more all of this will become, a pleasant experience.
You bet. Thanks, Natalie. Good question. It's 36 minutes past the hour. If you wanted a time check, we are going to continue for a little while. So any questions outstanding, put them in the box, Q&A. Also, we are open to answering questions on Twitter. If you have a question tomorrow and you go, "Oh, I should have asked them," it's at Ian Sanders and it's at JK Hoey, which are both in the Zoom webinar chat. If you scroll up, you'll see those there. One thing I wanted to ask you about, and it fascinates me, but it's so obvious in a way, is that often those real quality relationships, they take time. Mm-hmm. You and I met 8 years ago. I had a client that I did some work with last year, a private equity firm, and he reached out to me because I had a conversation in the rain with him at the Do Lectures in 2012. And he didn't reach out to me for 7 years, till actually it was the back end of 2018. So it was six years. And it was like, I think often I say to people, it's about a long game, and it's not even a freaking game. You were a nice person, you had a genuine conversation with someone. 6 years later, they go, "Oh yeah, you might be good for this project." And then they end up working with you. And I just say that to people sometimes. I don't want to sound like an old man, but I do say that to sometimes people who are really starting out, who are really impatient about getting something. I'm like, like any relationship in your life, yeah, a quality relationship is going to take time to build and time to get there. And sometimes, all right, 7 years is a long time, but it wasn't like I was even hunting for business. It was just, we had a connection and, someone might want to work with me. And that's often how my clients come about,
Right. Right. That's exactly it. You never know with these things. And this is why how we make people feel is so important, because something that they come across and they go, "Oh, right. Oh, I had a really great conversation. Oh, and I really liked him." It's also important in terms of studies that have been done, that it is much easier to warm up an old relationship than it is to start a new one. And generally the number of hours that it takes to move people from being an introduction to an acquaintance to like a real friend, not like a Facebook friend, like friend, right? Yeah. So do all of us have, 200 or 400 hours to spend getting to know someone? This is why I say to people, how you show up every day. You may only show up for 5 minutes to chat with someone on Twitter, but that's going to make a difference.
Yes.
Right? So how you show up every day, and then what that enables you to do after a period of time, because the study, like I said, study is showing, like I think it was out of the University of Kansas, that the ease at which it takes to warm up a relationship when it was a solid relationship before. I'll give you an example of someone who reached out to me recently. I'm just gonna say it. The person was a jerk when I worked with them. Right. Like a total jerk, totally self-focused on their own thing. And I feel very badly. Well before the crisis we're in now, was having a very hard time with a job search. I think it was a combination of the function she was in and it evolving, and her being very wedded to a certain mode of practice. And showed up in a LinkedIn in-mail that I was like, oh my God, like, what is this? you're expecting me to drop everything for you, and you were never there for me as a colleague. Now, I left, having an office and all that kind of stuff back in 2009, but I can tell you, I have people still from that time who reach out, and those who were great colleagues, I drop things for. So this is not like, oh, Kelly, it's been, over 10 years. And this is why, like, if you, right now, if you're sort of sitting there thinking, oh God, I have not been a great colleague to, step up the act, because you need those networks and you never know when you're going to need them. And you can reach out 2, 3, 5, 10 years later if you were a good colleague. If you weren't a good colleague, change your actions now.
Before it's too late.
Yeah.
And I mean, as I confessed with my own story of networking faux pas, I suppose, when my coming back from South by Southwest in 2009, copying and pasting in with good intentions, this email, and this guy in DC said, thanks for the spam. I mean, I must admit, I reached out in a way, I replied to him straight away. I probably should have thought about it a bit longer, but I replied straight away saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This wasn't an automated thing. I genuinely like da-da-da-da-da. And I think, he calmed down a bit after that.
Yeah.
But I think, we're in a climate and a backdrop where we're doing so many things digitally and remotely. And when you can't read the other person's face, we have to be super careful, don't we? About language and about words. And also, a lot of us are in English speaking markets, but, New Yorkers do things differently from Londoners. And, we have all those cultural and territorial and regional differences. And I think we need to think carefully, don't we? About just because we're reaching out to someone in the English language, we need to think about where they are, about what that means in their world. And it matters, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking of an example of a friend of mine. So this is back, before coronavirus, and his mother had come out to visit him in San Francisco, and they'd, go to the Starbucks to get coffee. And the baristas out in San Francisco are like chatting away and, giving you your horoscope. And, I'm originally from the West Coast, so I'm allowed to say these things. And like talking away. And his mother is like, from the Bronx, and she's just like, what is going on? They come back to New York, they go to a Starbucks, New York, like, what are you having? And she looks at her son and she goes, now I'm home. Now I'm good. I don't know what was going on over there. So, you've got to know your market, how they communicate. And I also think you go back to an individual. This is, again, really, oh, good, there's noise. It's New York. Oh, good. I was thinking we're going to have like 12 sirens during this podcast back in the day, but there we go. We've got one. Or webinar, not podcast, webinar. Like, think of an individual, like, sometimes you got to realize, oh, I'm asking them this question, or I'm reaching out for this. How many other people are doing this?
Yeah.
How many other people are? So how should I phrase this with that understanding in mind?
Yeah, really think about it. I mean, I think that's a common theme across all the advice you've given over the last 75 minutes. I think that's a really good takeaway for everyone about think first before you tweet, before you email, before you reach out, before you respond, and nuance it to that person. Right. Well, I'm going to wrap up in a minute. Unless any questions pop into that Q&A, open that box, type in thing. Otherwise, you can get hold of us afterwards, because we'll be happy to ask any questions that arise. Kelly, I know you've given your Twitter coordinates, but for the benefit of people who aren't familiar with your work, where can people find you digitally? Where should they best head to if they want to find out more about your work? And, well, obviously, this is the book, which we've mentioned a couple of times, but there's your Twitter handle there. And I guess your bio for people not on Twitter, your Twitter bio, which will be accessible, will give you the, it's jkellyhoey.com, is it?
No, .co. I'm going to put that. There we go. We've got that in there.
Right.
Yes, thank you for mentioning the book, because I would say so much of what I do and talk about is there in the book, and it's always a good place to start a conversation with someone who's already flipped through a few of the pages. I also have a podcast now, same name, Build Your Dream Network, comes out weekly. It is well, it's 12 minutes this week. I try to keep it under 10. So I'm not asking you for an hour of time, and I usually just keep it really single-minded focused. So there is some past episodes that do address some of the things we talked about, like where is your network? Lots of people think they don't have one. You do. You know, you've got more people connected to between university, college, part-time jobs, like your friends, your neighbors. You just never know, you know, where your next opportunity is going to come from. So think of the fullest extent of the richness and diversity of the people in your life. Often enough, we segment our networks and we think, oh, this person is only good for X. You never know who they know. So why not talk to your yoga instructor about your career needs? Because guess what? They may have another person they're instructing who needs to hire someone with your talent. So there's all sorts of stuff like that I share in the podcast, and always open for people to ask questions or to say, gee, I really wish you'd talk about. I'm happy to do that too. Great.
And here's for podcasts that are sub 15 minutes. You know, we don't want too many of the 2-hour ones. We haven't got time for 2 hours. We got time for 15 minutes. So
yeah, well, like I said, like 10 minutes a week, as I sort of say, 10 minutes a week can change your networking.
Yeah.
And not just like 10 minutes listening to my podcast, but 10 minutes of sending, you know, every day taking 10 minutes or every week taking 10 minutes to think about somebody else and sending them a note or seeing what they're up to. It will transform your network. You do not need to go on to endlessly to conferences or, you know, endlessly to, you know, coffee dates or all that kind of thing. Just pay attention to what's going on, help people out a little bit every day, do one thing. Like if you take nothing else, do one thing every day, you'll transform your network.
What wonderful, practical, actionable advice to leave it on. Kelly, I've really enjoyed the last hour and a quarter. And thank you. Oh, a lot of people are saying lovely things on the chat there. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today. And at some stage in the future, for people that are UK based, Kelly will be appearing live in General Assembly London, Whitechapel High Street. So I look forward to that very much. But in the meantime, I want to say, Kelly, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your insight. And thank you to every single one of you who joined the call. It's been great spending time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian.
Hey, cheers.